The Department of Children and Family Services gets a new director, and guns and abortion are on the radar at the State House. We'll talk about it next on Capitol View. Welcome to Capitol View, the program where we talk about state issues, sometimes federal issues, and how they just might affect your life. I'm Bernie Schoenburg from the State Journal-Register. Legislative session is hot and heavy. A few people coming to town now and then to express their views on things. Coming to the studio today to help me talk about this, Adrianna Pitrelli is back. She is State House reporter for the Chicago Daily Law Bulletin. Welcome back.
Thank you.
And his first time on the show, Jeff Rogers from the relatively new Capital News Illinois Bureau. He is the bureau chief. He is also director of the Illinois Press Foundation, which is one of the funders of that new organization, helping all of us newspapers cover the State House. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, Department of Children and Family Services has had troubled times. There have been some highly publicized cases of small children who have been killed in homes after contact with Department of Children and Family Services. This is an ongoing problem. Governor Rauner blamed Pat Quinn for things like that. Governor's own Governor Pritzker is very upset that this is still going on. Named a new director this week. Jeff, some details?
Yeah, Mark D. Smith is the new director pending approval from the Senate. He comes from Martha's Health and Wellness, which is a nonprofit agency which contracts with the state.
That's up Chicago area,
yeah,
correct?
The Chicago area. He will be the 13th, maybe 15th, depending on how you count, DCFS director in the past 10 years. So that tells you, I think, a little bit about what kind of a tough job he's walking into.
Yeah, it's a very, I've heard it described as the toughest job in state government. Not necessarily just to be the director of the Department of Children and Family Services, but think of what happens. There are, caseworkers are overloaded. They have to answer complaints within a certain period of time. They go to homes where there are horrible domestic situations and children in the balance, and these people have the power to bring the police with them and remove children from homes from their parents. Can you imagine trying to do something like that?
No.
So we will see how that goes. I know there was a hearing. Senator Andy Menard was talking to the person who's been interim director and saying, every year we read a list of names of children who are killed in this committee, and why don't you just ask for what you need? And so I know that Governor Pritzker in his new budget, I believe it's about 125, 126 new caseworkers that he's trying to bring on. I believe the union is certainly in favor of those workers. So it's one of those things that costs, but it's just a necessary function of government.
Except I think that's only a portion of what DCFS says that it needs, although they're not specifically asking for what they feel like they need, which was a point of contention during the hearing this week as well.
Great. Well, we wish them the best at figuring out this problem, because it's one of those that I don't think is partisan. You hear people from both sides arguing for, let's get some more resources where we need them, and we will move forward with that. So Adrianna, also, I mentioned at the opening in the show that guns and abortion, these are hot topics. Gun legislation is, I'm not aware that anything particularly egregious to gun owners is there, but given that we have a Democratic legislature and a Democratic governor who is basically leans toward gun control, and certainly former Governor Rauner during the campaign kept calling Pritzker on the downstate radio station he would talk to a gun grabber. We had iGold Day, which is Illinois Gun Owners Lobby Day. They meet at the convention center downtown Springfield. They walk to the Capitol. They rally. We really do have kind of an upstate downstate split in this thing, don't we?
We do. So like you said, we have a Democratic controlled state house, but then you have thousands of people. I think they estimate about 8,000 people came to Springfield this year who are against these measures, who are proud gun owners and feel as if the people of Chicago are kind of making decisions for them. I know they're pretty upset about that. I know a lot of measures were introduced post-Aurora shooting, and so I don't know that anything crazy official has happened yet, but it's definitely one of those things where everybody downstate They're mostly, not everybody,
yeah,
but a
and
lot
where
of
the
people
hunting culture and the gun
downstate,
culture. Well,
where they have two totally different reasons as to why they want their guns, right? So people in Chicago think, we have these high murder rates and homicides, and so gun control is going to stop this. And then people downstate are saying, well, we don't use our guns to kill people down here. It's just a way of
it's hunting, but it's also protect your
right,
family,
protect your family,
yourself. Certainly, Governor Pritzker already in this term did sign a bill for the state oversight certification, I think, or licensing. But I think it's at least finding out that getting on state record their federal licensing for gun shops, which gun shop owners and gun rights advocates didn't want, and Governor Pritzker did move in that direction. So it's certainly a first step in that regard. It is interesting that there are some legislators who have been talking about, and I don't know if it's a joke or not. I don't think they think it is, but they talk about seceding from Chicago and trying to get it to be a different state. C.D. Davidsmeyer from Jacksonville apparently signed on to this idea. I have read. I didn't talk to him about it. We have heard things like this before. It shows the giant disconnect, but it also perhaps doesn't look at the reality that I know Paul Simon Public Policy Center, Southern Illinois University, has done studies in the past or just recently about that more money flows from Chicago to the rest of the state than goes the other way because you have so many roads and state institutions in smaller towns downstate. So, but there is this kind of a cultural divide, despite the fact that we are a blue state, and like 4/5 of the people in Illinois live in the northeast quadrant.
And I think sometimes people forget what an economic driver the Chicago market is for the rest of the state as well. And I mean, there's arguments to both sides. That argument about seceding from Chicago from the rest of the state.
That's not going anywhere. That would take
it's older than I am, so it's been there for a while.
Yeah, we will see where that goes. So that will just be a continuing point of contention. We will see what the Pritzker administration does in this regard and how much political capital they use in the gun thing. And you mentioned Aurora, Adrianna. Of course, this was a workplace situation. Somebody's getting fired and then open fire on his coworkers.
On that note,
it
doesn't seem like the Pritzker administration is that interested in using their capital on these particular legislation.
Yeah.
I mean, it
that
doesn't seem
fair.
like that's where they're focused.
They're really moving forward on tax issues, which,
right.
and I think we'll get to that in a minute. Just one note first, though, or some little discussion on the issue of abortion, which again, there was really a show of force by the Catholic community. Blaise Supich, who is the Chicago-based cardinal, along with other bishops from across the state, including Bishop Propraki in the Springfield diocese, which is 29 counties, had a press conference at the State House midweek, and basically saying, Governor Pritzker has said we want Illinois to be the most liberal state for abortion rights, and they say we don't want late-term abortions, even if it's a small percentage. This is, murder. We know where the church stands. We want to put a break on this. And Adrianna, this show of force, again, I don't know, the Democratic legislature may be more apt to be for abortion rights, but the Catholic Church is one of the organizations fighting back strongly.
So there's technically 4 bills going through the State House right now. I think there's 2 twin versions of bills. So there's one that would strike down the law that requires girls to notify their parents if they want to get an abortion. And lawmakers have said, well, some girls don't have a good enough relationship with their parents to say, they might get talked out of it or something worse even. Yeah. And then the other one would basically repeal all existing abortion restrictions that currently remain in Illinois. I know they're moving through the Senate, but they're stuck in House subcommittee. I don't know what the possibility of them actually getting through this session is, but I know it's something Pritzker wants. I don't think he's focusing all of his attention on it this session. I think he has bigger goals at the moment, but it's definitely something he wants, and it's something lawmakers want. But the Catholic Church has always been against I believe they've always been against this.
Right.
They, like you said, came to the Capitol this week and said, that these lawmakers are spreading misinformation and
Right.
And
then I think it was the American Civil Liberties Union said that they were overstating some of the what the bills would do as well. So this is it's a cultural thing. Illinois has, we did, even though Democrats have often been in control, there was the parental notification law put into effect. It wasn't actually enacted by the state for some years after it was passed, but former Attorney General Lisa Madigan finally did it, and now there's this move to undo it, and creates a lot of discussion. And again, I don't know, Jeff, if the governor wants to focus on that as much as he does on tax plans and getting adequate revenue to fix state government's budget problems.
I wouldn't say it's as high of a priority, certainly. I wonder if the parental notification legislation, if it stood alone in a normal session, that would probably draw more attention than it has in this session. And I kind of wonder if the repeal and replace may be stealing a little bit of the attention away from the parental notification legislation, allows the parental notification legislation to pass, where maybe the repeal and replace doesn't this time, and then maybe with an eye on a future session.
Yeah, well, we'll see. And you have to know that politics works into everything. I don't know where Speaker Madigan is on this in particular. He has generally done things that allow Democrats to get elected, even though he's a good Catholic, and I can't remember what he is personally on the pro-choice, pro-life spectrum, but certainly the Democratic caucus has been more toward women control their bodies, abortion rights. So, but he also knows that that can drive, particularly in rural areas of the state or more conservative areas of the state, that can hurt some of his members, and that's a vote they don't want to take. And certainly they structure those roll calls so not everybody has to vote that way, but if the legislature passes it, there's more of an argument for conservatives to say, let's elect more of our own next time around.
I thought it was a little interesting yesterday in the Planned Parenthood call that LG Sims essentially was
State
saying,
senator, who is actually pushing the
right.
end of parental notification.
Right. Essentially is saying this should be a civil discussion, and let's make sure that we talk about both sides and try to negotiate this, and was trying to take a really high road on that discussion, where I think probably we've passed that point already. I mean, when you have people who are proponents of the repeal and replace saying essentially we want to make Illinois the most progressive state in terms of abortion law, I think you've kind of passed that point of being able to have a civil discussion on an issue where you probably can't anyway.
Yeah, and when the cardinal and the bishops had their press conference, which I watched from afar through the wonder of a computer, it was clearly a more kind of low-level, low-volume discussion than a week earlier when there were thousands of people packing the rotunda, and Bishop Propraki from Springfield, for example, was blaming, he said he hates to say it, but Democrats are like the party of abortion, and it reminded him of Hitler crossing Europe and David versus Goliath, and he also said, I think, he said mainstream media is part of the abortion Goliath that we're fighting. So that's kind of the high-level rhetoric that you may not always expect in the rotunda.
Kind of hard to walk back from that.
So anyway, let's move on to some tax talk, because clearly much of the agenda that Governor J.B. Pritzker wants to accomplish kind of depends on getting Illinois in a better fiscal place. In his view, and it's a view that is opposed by almost all Republicans right now, even though they're in a severe minority, he wants to go to a graduated income tax. That would take the legislature voting with big majorities in the House and Senate, which Democrats have, to put on the 2020 November ballot a change in the state constitution, because right now our constitution demands that the income tax level be flat for all earners. The Pritzker administration and a group called Think Big Illinois, which Governor Pritzker is helping fund on the outside, are saying 97% of people would pay the same or less, even if it's just a little less in taxes, if you have a graduated income tax with rates that he has proposed, which he proposed in a press conference a few weeks ago. And only 3% of the highest earners would pay more, and that would generate more than $4 billion a year. Republicans, business groups say you can't trust Democrats, that those brackets would stay. Once you pass the constitutional amendment, they can change those brackets at any time, and it will get the middle class. And Pritzker, he put out something with a county-by-county look, or Think Big Illinois. No, actually, the administration just this week, saying like in Sangamon County, I think it's 98% of people would pay the same or less under his proposal. So I guess there's also Paul Simon Public Policy Institute did a poll, And Jeff, why don't you discuss that, because it seems to help the Pritzker side of things if the poll question was appropriately worded.
If I remember the number correctly, I think it was 67% supported the graduated tax as proposed. And even if I remember correctly, 55% of Republicans
I think I heard that as well.
approved that. And that's, it's one of those things that when you essentially say, let's tax the rich, you're going to have a majority of people who like that, certainly. So I think there's political momentum on the Pritzker side on this. I do think that early on, opponents did a pretty effective job at chipping away at maybe some of that support. But it feels like in the past week or so, the Pritzker administration has gained a little bit of momentum.
Yeah, well, one of the anti-views was also a group of Senate Republicans who had a press conference and proposed that any change in tax law itself, instead of just a simple majority vote to say the rates can change, they want a 2/3 vote, which is, gets, I think it's 79 people in the House, where Democrats only have 74 now, and a 3/5 vote is 71. They want Republican votes to have to be on there. Adrianna, I don't think that the Democratic legislature is going to pass this, but it helped Republicans again make the point that watch out for those Democrats. They are promising that only the top 3% will pay, but we want to make sure that it stays that way, or you can't believe that they say that. They actually want the tax to be flat because they say that's good for job creators, et cetera.
Right. It made them feel as if they're still putting those talking points out there. They're still against it. They're still making an effort to not let this pass. But, I mean, it would take a joint constitutional amendment, I believe, to change it to the 2/3. So it's not going to happen. I mean, I don't know, but it probably would not happen. I know I talked to Senator Don Harmon, and he said the Republicans' proposal was just a ploy to protect wealthy people and to combat the push for a progressive income tax. So even Democrats know this isn't going to happen.
Right, and he's a Democrat from Oak Park,
yes,
up in the Chicago area.
Just another talking point for them, another way for them to just get their rhetoric out there. And I think we might see more of that from the Republicans, as more everyday people, everyday Republicans and polls aren't as low as you would think, because they're not necessarily siding with the Republicans who are in the Capitol. So
right. Well, the rhetoric is also pretty strong. Where there's this Think Big Illinois that Pritzker is helping to fund. There's also something called Ideas Illinois, which the main spokesman is Greg Bays, a Jacksonville native, but he was many years and recently stepped down as president and CEO of the Illinois Manufacturers Association. Again, sounding that alarm that this will affect the middle class, and you can't trust the fact that progressive tax would only attack the rich.
And I think it's interesting that their ad campaign is specifically targeting for Democrats who are in more not very strong blue districts, maybe more from kind of purple districts. And
maybe people who President Trump helped elect Democrats last time around, that kind of thing.
I mean, I don't know that will work, but I found that to be an interesting approach to it.
Yeah, and that's like mailers going out in addition to the other things that we've seen on the internet. And I know the Pritzker side, the Think Big people, have started running some TV ads, and the other side, if they haven't, I know I've seen some videos of theirs on the internet talking about the perils of this thing. Well, this is sad, but something necessary to talk about, I guess, and Governor Pritzker recently talked about it. There's something called Scott's Law that's named after a state policeman who was killed while at a traffic stop on a highway years ago. And Governor Pritzker recently had a press conference to urge people to follow Scott's Law, which is move over if you see a police car or an emergency vehicle flashing lights pulled over on a highway. You're supposed to move over a lane if there's a lane to move over. Obviously slow down, but move over. As we started this show, we just learned apparently another state policeman has been killed in an accident in far northern Illinois, and that's very sad. This is just one of those things where a governor can use his bully pulpit to try to get people to do the right thing.
And I mean, I hope they do. It's 15 people in less than 4 months, and it's
15 accidents.
Oh, yeah. Well, yes, not 15
police
people
cars
who
have
died.
been hit.
Right,
yeah,
yes.
Right.
But 15 accidents, and it's been less than 4 months. It's one of those things that I feel like is almost common sense. It's not something super difficult to do. So hopefully, with not saying he's threatening people, but with making it, hey, this is what you should do. Hopefully more people are hearing that and realizing it's not that hard, just move on over.
There you go.
Well, when you see too, I mean, in 2016 there were 5 of these incidents, and I think 6 or something like that in 2017, and we've got 15 already this year. It makes you wonder, I mean,
what's going on?
What's going on?
Yeah.
And I think that's where the bully pulpit and making people aware again about this, I think, is really important.
Yeah, and I'm sure enforcement is picking up too, because maybe there was, I don't know the statistics on tickets. There are lots of other kinds of bills that are going through the legislature, and Jeff, you expressed interest as we were discussing the show.
Sure.
There's a bill that would establish a nurse-to-patient ratio in hospitals and beyond, and it's interesting because the Hospital Association says this could be very costly, but I know that the legislation as proposed would say there has to be, like for people in critical care situations, 1 nurse for every 2 patients, in emergency rooms 1 for every 3, in medical surgery situations 1 for every 4.
Right.
And so that would add a lot of costs at a time where, is there a nursing shortage
There's
too,
a
I think?
tremendous nursing shortage, and there is a bigger one coming, because I think it was 1/3 of the workforce right now in hospitals. 1/3 of those nurses will be retiring within the next 5 years, because you have a lot of baby boomers at that level. So the shortage that is a big problem right now is only going to get bigger. And you know, the opponents of this say that obviously what you're going to be doing is making that an even bigger problem if you limit the number of patients that a nurse can see at one time. So there's a real, I think it's kind of under the radar right now, but I think as this advances, and advanced out of a House committee yesterday, this is going to be something that I think will become a little bit more higher profile, because it gets into healthcare and it gets into the kind of service that you get when you're in a hospital. And there's the arguments on both sides, I think, are really valid. I don't know what the outcome of this is going to be. I do know it'd be the only state other than California to do this. So I'm not sure what the likelihood that this will pass.
Well, and maybe you can judge this or not, just having been around a long time and not having followed this issue closely. The Hospital Association is one of those powerful lobby groups. Every legislator has hospitals in their areas. The hospitals are well-respected and very necessary institutions. They have a lot of financial needs. They serve a lot of people. A lot of them serve a lot of Medicaid patients. And so I'm looking maybe compromise over time.
Right.
Because that's the kind of thing where if you just impose a giant swath of new cost, even though it's to a good and necessary purpose, you know, there will be an outcry, and there may not be the will to vote that in right.
Well,
even if you have a Democratic legislature where healthcare, I mean, everybody likes healthcare, but you know, costs have to be factored in by everybody.
Once your local hospital starts talking about how they're going to have to cut staff to make this work, then you've got a problem, I think, politically, because people will not stand for that.
Yeah, well, I will turn the tables on to just another ongoing issue that everybody expects to happen this year, because there's a will, and under Governor Rauner for 4 years when he was just fighting with the Democratic legislature, now we have a Democratic governor, Democratic legislature. What are we going to do about infrastructure, roads and bridges? We keep hearing stories about how many bridges and roads in different parts of the state are in terrible condition or in close to failing condition. Interestingly, just midweek, the State Chamber of Commerce, headed by Todd Meisch here in Springfield, put forth a funding plan for infrastructure. He characterized it, I heard him in a radio interview, saying that it would at least get certain issues out there for discussion. One thing is to increase the gasoline tax. I think it was from the current 19 cents to I think it's in the range of 40 or 44. Significant increase. As he notes, it's been like 20 years since that has gone up. But he would also take the sales tax or phase that. Illinois now charges its regular old sales tax, which goes into the state's general fund, on top of gasoline prices, including the tax that's there. So that would phase out. So all of this new money would go to road and bridge funding, and I guess mass transit. There would also be a layered view, higher priced cars. You'd have to pay more for fees. Electric cars would have to pay something more so that they are carrying their weight, as their weight helps break apart roads. So it's a business group who more aligned with Republicans in general, saying we want to be part of this process. We understand the Democrats are there, and even Republicans, Adrianna, I think, are open to the idea of infrastructure funding because everybody needs the plan, and it's been 10 years since the state has had a big program.
Right. Everyone said that they know this needs to be done and they'd like to get it done this year. It just kind of depends on, the little details. I know there's a group that's been traveling the state for, I think, a month or so.
State Senator Andy Menard is one of those people.
And they're going to different cities and they're talking about what those areas need and what their plan is. So I'm interested to see, because we haven't seen a measure or a bill come out of that yet because they're still traveling. I'm interested in seeing if they're going to work with the chamber on their measure. Are they going to have something separate? What are we really going to see? Because the Democrats don't necessarily need the Republicans, so are they just going to...
Yeah, except everything is nicer if you can get bipartisan vote to raise a tax to create a program, because you don't want to just have the other side blame you for it, even though they're at the ribbon cuttings in their districts.
Yes, so, definitely.
As we near the end of the show, I should just say this: we don't talk a lot about local elections, but in the city of Springfield, I know, and I assume several other cities in the viewing area, there's an election coming up Tuesday in Springfield. Current Mayor Jim Langfelder is running against Frank Edwards, a former alderman who served as mayor for a bit. In Chicago, there's a runoff election for mayor there. Rahm Emanuel will be fading into the sunset or something. I'm sure he'll do something big. He's already been a TV pundit. Lori Lightfoot seems to be leading the polls over Tony Preckwinkle there. And Jeff, people care about who the Chicago mayor is because Chicago is such a big force in Illinois, right?
Sure, they do. And I think no matter who wins that election, there's going to be a significant change in the city of Chicago government. And I think people are just interested to see what that change might be, because it feels like you've always had sort of the power brokers person in that position, and now maybe that's not going to be the case.
Lori Lightfoot comes from the reform side of things, even though she was in a big law firm, and she's being painted by Tony Preckwinkle, who, by the way, used to be a reformer and is now head of the Democratic Party of Cook County, has been, painting Preckwinkle as just a corporate lawyer, but, painting Lightfoot, yes, Lori Lightfoot. So it will be quite a change. We'll see where it goes. Anyway, we're about out of time. Adrianna Pitrelli, thank you. Jeff Rogers, thank you. I'm Bernie Schoenburg, thank you, and we'll see you next time on Capitol View.